Daniel. Yeah, maybe now moving a bit further downstream, it would make sense for you, Damien, to give a view from somebody who's, on the kind of, give us a view from the Platina side, I guess, really, on the kind of market, how you're seeing the market, how you're seeing the US market responding.
Yeah, well, on the Atlantic Sapphire side, I just quickly starting with this, we're an essential business, but we've still moved all our non-critical employees to work from home. And we've put measures early, inside the blue houses, including taking temperature of everyone entering the site, promoting the use of PPE, face mask, for instance, and some social distancing. I think that was really important, and we've done great at it. And that's in order to guarantee continuity of construction and farming operations. On the sales side, well, we've seen a drop in our commodity food service sales, I would say close to 70%, but at the same time, our retail sales have more than doubled. As you guys know, a lot of the seafood counters have closed here in the US. People are trying to avoid the human contact part of waiting in line to order the fish at the seafood counter. And what we're seeing is a big jump in prepackaged, ready to cook, ready to eat convenience packaging, and also a big jump in the frozen side of our retail programs.
Damien, actually, on the issue of the big fish, how did you find selling those volumes? Were you able to, or did you just sort of shift what you were selling into the market?
No, because it was mostly based on our food service sales, we've really reduced the amount of larger fish that we're able to purchase every week. But that being said, we're starting to see signs of food service starting to start again. And we have just like Thomas's view, we're very optimistic on the future. We're starting to see food service starting to move, and we think, the US restaurant industry is resilient. They're ready to get back to work. And we think that the American consumers are going to play their part as well to support their local restaurants and going to eat out as the restrictions starts to loosen up. So we're positive that this should happen. And, in our view, talking to our food service partners, we think that we'll be back at around 50% of the volumes that we sell on salmon by June, and about 75% by October going into the fourth quarter.
Damien, what do you think from a US point of view?
One thing that's hard to predict is what's going to happen with the wild harvest, like we were discussing earlier, the risk of contagion and the lack of medical resources up there, and how that's going to affect, because that would be a big key of how much wild fish we're going to see over the summer. But our view is that when we start harvesting in Q3, we do expect lower commodity prices in general than 2019, but we have the advantage of bringing a different product to the markets, product that stands out from the rest of the salmon in the US, and that customers are willing to pay a premium for. Now, I guess in this economy more than ever, consumers are becoming more and more demanding on quality, production methods, that are more reasoned and thoughtful, with the environment. And we think that consumers are going to favor the local production, supporting local jobs, local farmers. So we think it'll be positive on that sense. We do expect for the prices to stay, at the current levels, at least from Norway, until Q3, and then to start to climb in Q4 into 2021 to get back to the levels we saw in 2019.
From an Atlantic Sapphire point of view, are you concerned though that you're going to be starting this first harvest at a time when the prices are going to potentially be going extremely low? I mean, have you be able to, how can you ride out that situation? What's the kind of the medium-term view?
Well, so far we've received very positive feedback from buyers, and we don't affect a negative pricing. Again, we have a different product. We're not here to compete with commodity. We're only going to produce 10,000 tons into a 650,000 ton market. So at this point, in our development, we're still a niche product. And I can't remember who was mentioning this, but our target customer is not necessarily the one that's currently losing his job. So we do think that the outlook for us is very positive, made in the USA, And we have a lot of also new alternatives that we'll be able to bring out to the markets by being locally produced, having a shorter value chain, and being able to do things like convenience packed, ready, grab and go sushi items, for instance. Like some of the most successful items that you see in Europe, the fresh, never frozen sushi grade items that we'll be able to provide for the shoppers, made in the USA. I think I can't hear you, Tom.
Oh, sorry, I'd muted myself. Will you be doing value-added processing within the facility, or are you going to be kind of co-packing, using co-packers?
We're going to do both depending on the lines, but we're planning on doing our own value add in terms of skin pack and in terms of that sushi grade loins ready to eat ourselves. We are planning other value added lines with co-packers here in the US as well.
Right. So will you be starting doing that this year, or will that be something you do in 2021?
Right away. And we'll be announcing soon the product lines that we're going to come out with as we start harvesting.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it'd be good to go around everyone and do a bit more of a kind of crystal ball outlook on how you see things evolving a bit more longer term, and what kind of what fundamental changes you think will be made to the industry as a result of this, because I think it's going to be the case in all industries that there's kind of reasonably substantial changes to the way that business works. So maybe Damien, I guess you've just been talking, you could start with that as to how the more kind of the crystal ball longer term outlook.
Well, yeah, it's a very interesting question, and it is our view, right? And it is a little bit of a crystal ball outlook. But we think the corona economy, the current situation, is going to lead to changes in the way people buy seafood. Again, I've mentioned before, convenience packaging, ready to cook, ready to eat, is going to become even more of a staple in shopping baskets. And we also think that the increase in e-commerce sales that we're seeing right now is going to stick a little bit like the new shoppers that we're acquiring for salmon at retail level. We've seen also a big increase in e-commerce, and we believe that that's going to be one of the drivers to replace part of the food service sales that have dropped. As restaurants have closed, and the lockdown is in effect, people are trying new things at home. They have very limited availability to go into restaurants, so they're becoming, more and more willing to try to cook seafood at home. I think that's a really big deal. In the American market, consumers are not comfortable with cooking fish because it's not something that they're used to like we are in Europe. And we feel that all those new shoppers that are now, having time to look for recipes on social media, and to actually try the adventure of cooking seafood at home, are also going to become new customers for salmon in particular and for seafood in general.
We've had some interesting questions come in from people tuning in, so I'll throw some of those out there, and maybe whoever thinks they can provide a good answer could respond. One from someone in the UK is come in saying, to what extent will the disruption caused by COVID-19 affect the uptake of new infrastructure projects such as offshore and RAS? So I guess that's probably more for the people on the farming side. I mean, we've obviously Atlantic Sapphire is obviously it's so far down the road that's going to happen. But I certainly know from speaking to contacts that quite a lot of RAS projects are certainly at the financing stage are sort of on hold. What do we think about that?
Well, I guess I can take that one. Well, we don't normally comment on other projects because we don't know how far they are. But I think it's fair to assume that with those market conditions, the availability of financing is going to become lower, and that kind of early stage projects are going to become less attractive to investors. And the one thing I can say is that it's important to keep in mind that from financing to first fish to market, you should consider that it's going to take you at least 5 years. So there might be projects in the pipeline, but we think that that's at least going to delay them.